They once told you that you needed to speak, that you had to explain every feeling, prove your worth, express your pain so others could understand. That silence was cowardice. Disappearing was childish, and only reacting showed that you still had strength. But no one told you that sometimes the greatest strength lies in saying nothing at all, not to escape, but to respond in a way no words could ever match, a silent response powerful enough to dismantle the entire old narrative. When you stop trying, stop explaining, stop proving yourself, everything begins to shift. The cycle you once believed was the relationship now collapses into the space you leave behind. The person who once hurt you no longer has a foothold to manipulate, no tools to control your emotions, and suddenly they must face their own actions. The moment you stop, you break the cycle they thought was unchangeable. You withdraw your energy from the game, and simply through your silence, you force them to reflect, to doubt themselves, and to realize that the control they once thought was theirs has now vanished. The kind of absence that hurts the most doesn't come with announcements or warnings. It sends no final message, demands no apology, creates no drama. It simply happens. And its weight doesn't come from noise, but from unpredictability. The person once accustomed to your reactions, the long messages, the explanations that soften their anger, now faces a complete void. When that void is maintained long enough, it becomes an emotional punishment. They realize you will no longer reply. You will make no exceptions. You will no longer explain. You become intentional silence, something they cannot control. They expected tears, drama, pleading, and for you to return and yield. But you don't give them that opportunity. You disappear cleanly and calmly, letting all their efforts fall into the void you've created. Within that space, the questions that once tormented you now haunt them. Did I go too far? Will they come back? Have I lost them forever? The confrontation is replaced by calculated detachment, not to hurt them, but to protect yourself. Because the time has come when persistence only means harming yourself, and then you choose to stop. The moment you stop, you win. From that point on, absence becomes a language, distance becomes a boundary, and your silence becomes the clearest message of all. You no longer belong to the old cycle, and you have chosen peace, self-mastery, and dignity. When you stop speaking, stop explaining, stop reacting, the first thing to collapse is not the relationship, but the emotional power structure the other person once relied on. In any manipulative relationship, there is always an invisible script. One person speaks, the other reacts. One creates the challenge, the other yields. They do not need love or respect. They only need your reaction. That reaction is the fuel that sustains their power. And when you stop reacting, the entire map of control they depend on immediately falls apart. Strategic silence throws the other person into a state of confusion. They send small signals, a message, a hint to start a conversation, a challenge, but receive no response. Their brain begins searching for a familiar sound and finds nothing. They feel puzzled, anxious, and for the first time must confront a void they never knew how to fill. Psychology calls this the Zeigarnik effect, the human tendency to fixate on unfinished stories. When you remain silent, you leave an incomplete story that their mind cannot let go of, forcing them to speculate, blame themselves, and create painful scenarios in their own imagination. With every moment you do not respond, they begin to wonder, did I go too far? Do they still care? Have they forgotten me? The questions you once carried on your shoulders now return to haunt them, but with no answers. The helplessness of not being able to control you becomes the most silent yet profound collapse. They assume you are silent out of hurt or fear, but in reality, you are protecting your own energy and inner calm. The Stoic understands that silence is not running away, but a deliberate retreat, a tool to reclaim inner control. Epictetus once said, "It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." When you remain silent, you force the other person to reflect on their own behavior, the dismissive words, the manipulative actions, and the selfishness they once concealed. You need no accusation, no argument. Your strategic absence itself becomes a mirror reflecting it all. The power of silence lies in creating a void they do not know how to fill. It leaves them helpless, confused, and reflecting on their own behavior. The more they try to manipulate or seek a reaction from you, the deeper they sink into that void. Intentional silence becomes a silent mental storm, soundless yet strong enough to shatter their control structure and force them to confront their inability to govern you. And it is within this void that you learn the most valuable lesson. You cannot control the behavior of others, but you can always control your own reactions. When you remain silent, you not only protect yourself, but also turn it into a strategic tool, rendering every attempt at manipulation meaningless and creating an inner strength without uttering a single word. When you begin to understand this mechanism, you realize that silence is not merely a reaction. It is the strategy of the awakened. You no longer need to shout to prove yourself, nor argue to be understood. Your stillness now takes the form of strength, a power born from discipline and awareness, not from resentment. And it is at this moment that you step into a higher level of understanding, the level that Stoic philosophers spoke of thousands of years ago, the power of self-mastery and silence. The Stoic does not see silence as running away, but as an expression of self-mastery and inner discipline. In a world that constantly urges you to react, explain, and prove your worth, the ability to remain silent is evidence of true strength. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can a man find peace more fully than within his own soul." That peace does not come from forcing others to understand you, but from mastering yourself, maintaining calm amidst every conflict and manipulation. Stoic silence is the refusal to react according to a predetermined script. When you no longer explain or justify yourself, you withdraw the control others believed they had. They once relied on your reactions to manipulate, and when those reactions vanish, their power structure collapses. Silence is not passive, it is a strategy, protecting your energy, preserving your calm, and setting boundaries for yourself. Seneca emphasized, "The strong man is not the one who attacks, but the one who restrains himself." Silence does not stem from fear or helplessness. It arises from the awareness that your emotions are not for others to manipulate, and that every explanation or justification only drains your energy and pulls you into a meaningless loop. When you remain silent, you step out of the game the manipulator believes they control, while simultaneously reinforcing your own self-mastery and dignity. Epictetus once said, "If someone offends you, remember that it is you who allows them to hurt you." When practicing strategic silence, you do not seek revenge, nor use harsh words or actions to punish. Instead, you maintain control over your emotions, forcing the other person to confront their own behavior. The void you create becomes a reflective mirror, compelling them to recognize their past mistakes, selfishness, and manipulative actions. The silence of the Stoic is an invisible power. It requires no recognition, no justification, yet its impact is deeper than any criticism. You return to yourself to calm and learn to be selectively present, conserving your energy and turning absence into a powerful tool to protect your inner self, ensuring that no one can manipulate or control you again. When you begin to understand the nature of silence through the Stoic lens, you realize that silence is not merely an immediate reaction, but an art of living. It has layers, it has stages, and each stage carries a different form of strength. Not all silence is the same. Some remain silent out of hurt, others out of enlightenment. And from the moment you choose intentional silence, the journey begins to shift to a deeper level, where strategic absence becomes a language of power and freedom. Intentional disappearance does not happen in a single moment. It unfolds in stages, each subtle and powerful in its own way. The first phase is cutting off reactions. This is when you stop answering questions, stop explaining, stop proving yourself. No more explanations, no more tears or arguments. You do not react, not out of fear, but because you understand that every additional word only helps others maintain control. This very silence is the first step in breaking the old script, siphoning energy away from toxic relationships. The second phase is the amplified void. When you stop reacting, the other person no longer has a familiar anchor. Their mind tries to fill the gap you leave, generating assumptions, doubts, and feelings of guilt. Every small effort they make, a message, a challenge, a hint, falls into the vacuum you have created. The more they try, the more confused they become, and it is precisely this unpredictability that shatters the control structure they once thought unbreakable. That void is not merely a physical absence, it is a mental stage where they collapse on their own. The third phase is mystifying yourself. At this stage, you are no longer easy to read, no longer reacting according to their script. Access to you is no longer a given, but a privilege they must earn. Every action, every gesture, even prolonged silence becomes a powerful message, leaving them obsessed, trying to interpret and seek a return that will never come. You do not need to prove anything. You simply maintain selective presence, and in doing so, you become an uncontrollable figure, a living mystery they cannot manipulate. These three phases work together to create the power of strategic silence, withdrawing your energy, amplifying the void, and becoming an unpredictable mystery. When executed in harmony, you not only protect yourself, but also force the one who once manipulated you to confront their own lack of control, and that is when the collapse begins. Manipulators survive on certainty, on their ability to predict your every reaction. Every argument, every provocation, every challenge operates on one rule. They know exactly how you will respond. That sense of control is the fuel that sustains their emotional power. But when you choose strategic silence, they lose it all. Their mind no longer has a map to follow, no script to rely on. Gradually, they become disoriented, confused, and their layers of emotional defense begin to fall apart. Silence forces them to confront their own behavior and mistakes. In the past, when you constantly explained or yielded, they could ignore, evade, or justify themselves. Now, with no reaction, every misdeed, every abuse of power, and every flaw is laid bare. You need not make an accusation, argue, or justify yourself. The mere absence of your presence becomes a mirror, compelling them to face the truth they once avoided. The collapse begins the moment they can no longer manipulate you. When every prediction fails, their mind slips into a state of tension, doubt, and panic. They begin to ask themselves, did I go too far? Will they come back? Have I lost them forever? These unanswered questions become the most powerful weapon of silence. With every second you maintain your non-response, the void amplifies their anxiety, disappointment, and helplessness. The Stoic understands that collapse requires no noise. It happens within their mind, unfolding quietly, yet leaving a deeper impact than any argument ever could. They once thrived on your reactions, and now, when you are no longer the predictable instinct, their entire emotional power structure disintegrates. Strategic silence is a deliberate withdrawal, not an escape. It breaks every cycle of manipulation and creates a void the manipulator has no idea how to fill. This is why, when you maintain your silence, the one who once sought to control you becomes confused, crumbles, and is forced to face themselves, while you, in contrast, remain in full control of your mind and your energy. When the manipulator collapses before the void you leave, you begin to realize that true power lies not only in confusing them, but also in reclaiming yourself. Silence is not just an external weapon, it is a method to restructure your inner world. All the energy once spent on explaining, pleading, or trying to prove your worth now returns to you. Within that void, you learn to listen to yourself, understand your true needs, and recognize the boundaries necessary to protect yourself. Strategic silence allows you to detach from external pain and emotional manipulation, turning it into an opportunity to focus on inner growth. You no longer chase after others' reactions, nor get caught in cycles of control or meaningless arguments. Each time you remain silent, each time you withdraw your energy from old scripts, you are practicing self-mastery and calming the very essence of inner freedom that Stoic philosophy calls for. In the stillness, you also learn to be selectively present. You no longer appear out of habit or to please others. Every presence now carries value for yourself, for your energy. You understand that you need no one's recognition or understanding because you already comprehend yourself. Silence at this point becomes the most powerful language, wordless yet full of meaning, allowing you to take control of your emotions in your life. Ultimately, you realize that silence is not abandonment, but protection and renewal. You no longer confuse love with dependency or holding on to others with losing yourself. You learn to live fully in peace, and any interaction that follows comes from a place of self-mastery, not need or fear. From that place, you build a resilient, free, and inviolable version of yourself, where silence becomes a source of inner strength, rising above all manipulation and external control. When they return, many expect to find the old version of you, the one ready to react, ready to forgive, ready to yield. They hope you will slip back into your former role so they can continue the game they once manipulated. But now you are different. Intentional disappearance has changed not only how you show up, but also how others perceive you. They realize that access is no longer free, that you are no longer predictable and ready to respond to any stimulus. Each time they try again a message, a conversational hint, or an emotionally charged gesture, you maintain your principle. No response until real change occurs. This is the new boundary, the choice to be present, not for their desire, but because you determine your own value. You do not return to prove or explain. You return from a place of self-mastery and calm, and that leaves them both curious and powerless, for they no longer hold the control over you they once did. The Stoic teaches that when you protect your peace and set clear boundaries, you are practicing self-respect, not seeking revenge. Silence and absence, once passive, now become tools to filter people, helping you see who truly deserves a place in your life and who merely seeks to drain your energy without valuing it. When they realize you are not easily influenced, they are forced to confront their own behavior and the void they once never cared about. Those who return while maintaining old habits will encounter a barrier. You no longer allow any manipulative behavior to repeat, and those who truly change, who understand your value, will find your presence earned. This is when the power dynamic reverses. You retain your energy and calm, and they must respect the boundaries you set. When you operate according to this logic, silence is no longer mere absence. It becomes a statement of your value and control. Each time they return, they confront new boundaries where you have learned to be selectively present and never relinquish emotional power to the one who once manipulated you. Intentional silence is not simply withdrawing without reaction. It requires strategy and calculation to both protect yourself and create a lasting impact on the one who manipulated you. First, you must cut off triggers, turn off notifications, avoid the old touch points, times, places, or channels of communication that used to make you respond out of habit. Every attempt to pull you back into the old loop will fall into the void you create. And that is how you remove the other person's ability to predict you. The second is the 72-hour rule, or emotional distance for control. When emotions run high, instead of texting or explaining, give yourself time to calm down. This prevents you from falling into the reaction trap and keeps full control in your hands. Silence in this moment is not running away. It is practicing self-mastery and inner discipline. The third is the declaration through action, not words. If you must speak, keep it brief, clear, and decisive. Then return to silence. Every gesture or action carries a message. You are present selectively, no longer willing to be manipulated or swayed by their emotions. This is selective presence, showing up only when it is deserved and withdrawing when needed to protect your own peace. Finally, digital and social hygiene. Delete shortcuts, limit following, and stop passive interactions. By removing these excess touch points, you drain energy from manipulation mechanisms while reinforcing control over your own emotions. When executed in harmony, these strategies help you maintain inner power, making the manipulator unpredictable, unable to exploit your emotions, and forced to confront a void they never knew how to fill. Silence is no longer meaningless absence. It becomes a mirror, a boundary, and a subtle weapon for protecting yourself and asserting your value. When you begin practicing intentional silence, the temptation to return appears in many forms. Late nights, memories of the past, or the emptiness of social media can make you want to break the distance. This is the self-sabotage reflex, where loneliness instinctively tries to pull you back into the old loop, repeating mistakes you already know. To overcome it, you need to recognize this trap and establish replacement rituals. Instead of texting or calling, Take time for yourself. Drink a glass of water, practice deep breathing with the 4-7-8 rhythm, write down 3 lines of reflection about yourself, or take a short walk. These small actions help you separate from emotional impulses and cultivate calm. Each time you resist the reflex to return, you reinforce self-control. You remind yourself that a void that respects you is far better than a presence that destroys you. You do not go back to explain or prove anything, but to protect your inner peace and preserve the self-mastery you spent so long cultivating. This strategy not only maintains physical distance, but also allows you to control your emotional energy, leaving the manipulator with no opportunity to drag you into the old script. When you remain steadfast, the void created by your silence grows, and it becomes the most powerful weapon for protecting your inner power. Once you have learned to practice intentional silence, you realize that victory requires no shouting, no explanations, and no warnings. Victory comes from self-control, from maintaining calm, and from the ability to protect your own energy. Each time you do not react to provocation, each time you withdraw from meaningless arguments, you are rewriting the script of your life in a way where only you determine the rhythm and the rules. Silence is not running away. It is a strategic tool, a way to assert your value and control over your emotions. You need not prove anything, plead, or explain. You simply choose to be present selectively or to withdraw when necessary. Your presence and absence are now measured by your will and purpose, not by the manipulation of others. This is your new declaration. You owe no one an explanation, no one your presence, and no one your emotions. Those who once manipulated, hurt, or ignored you must now face a void they do not know how to fill. Your strategic silence becomes a mirror, a boundary, and a powerful message that you are no longer predictable, no longer a tool for their manipulation. Victory in silence is the victory of self-mastery, calm, and dignity. When you maintain distance and do not react to old provocations, you demonstrate that true strength does not lie in words or violent actions, but in the ability to control yourself and prevent others from hijacking your mind. If this video resonates with you, leave a comment with one word: silent. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to learn how to turn silence into both a weapon and a shield, protecting your energy, preserving inner calm, and transforming every absence into inviolable power. This is not the end, but the beginning of a new life where you master yourself and embrace freedom in silence.